Good morning, everyone. The last few talks I've given have been on, started with koans from the Vines and Entanglements collection, and I'm going to continue that theme of koans from that collection. If you haven't seen that book yet, it's by Thomas Juho Kirchner, and his translations are really wonderful. And what has interested me is after many years of working with koans, there's a number of koans in this book that I've never seen before. A lot of them are ones that are familiar, a little different translations of some of the ones that are in other collections. But there are quite a few of them that are unique, and some of them are really wonderful. So I'm going to start out by sharing one of them today. This is case 56 in Vines and Entanglements. It's called Gushan's Gatha. Now, a Gatha, for those of you who don't know, is a poem. Normally, Gathas are written after someone has some kind of enlightenment experience. So they'll have an experience, and then the poem is kind of traditional, or was traditional, to write a poem about your understanding of the Dharma or about your experience. And they're usually quite short and a little bit formatted, maybe. But I'll read the koan first and then get to the Gatha, which is only 2 lines long, later. Gushan Shigui said, "For 10 years at sea, I have sought my enemy. Until I find my enemy, I cannot rest." I'll read that one more time. Gushan Shigui said, "For 10 years at sea, I have sought my enemy. Until I find my enemy, I cannot rest." One of the things that I really love about this book, his translations, is he has wonderful little footnotes that explain some of the Chinese characters that he translated for this collection. And the art of translating ancient languages of any sort into modern English is pretty amazing. Ancient Chinese, and especially the Chinese language that was associated with Zen, is, I'm sure, especially complex. Because as usual, in any language, words can mean different things. It's true in English, it's especially true in Japanese, where you see a Japanese word and it can mean literally like 20 different things depending on the context it's used in, which is what makes the language difficult. Chinese is no exception. So anyway, what I thought was fascinating about this koan is that the word enemy, he translates it as enemy because he felt that that was the sense of the word that that best fit this line, but it can also mean a lover. And it can also mean one's original face, which is another way of saying in Buddhism or in Zen, your Buddha mind. So it can mean an enemy, it can mean lover, it can mean Buddha mind, the same 2 characters. Kind of interesting, huh? So the beautiful thing about this line, "For 10 years at sea, I've sought my enemy. Until I find my enemy, I cannot rest," is that all 3 of those things could apply to the line. You could use them interchangeably in a certain sense. It does change the meaning of it, I believe, but maybe not that much, and maybe not at all. In any event, let's look at it as enemy. "For 10 years at sea, I've sought my enemy. Until I find my enemy, I cannot rest." What this reminded me of when I read it for the first time is the poem. I should have looked up which koan it was out of the Blue Cliff record. I can't remember which one it is. But there's a line in a poem that's written after a koan after the commentary to a koan in the Blue Cliff record that talks about, or says, "How many times have I gone for you into the Blue Dragon Cave? How many times have I gone for you into the Blue Dragon's Cave?" And for many years, I I kind of interpreted that based on the fact that it was just a regular dragon. You know, it just happened to be a blue dragon, which didn't mean much to me. And then one day I figured, you know what? I think I was talking to Sensei Robert about something, and I thought, I'm going to just look it up. What is the blue dragon? What's the significance? And it turns out that there's 4 different colored dragons in Chinese uh, mythology. And the blue dragon symbolizes rebirth and spring. Um, so this person is descending. He's talking about descending into the blue dragon's cave, which we would normally think is a quite harrowing thing, you know, and in many movies and TV series that you see where dragons are involved, uh, these mythical Chinese characters, there's a lot of danger involved in going down to meet a dragon. Sometimes the dragon kills you, and sometimes, at least in these TV movies and shows, the dragon can be tamed, and then you harness the energy of the dragon, right? Which is extremely powerful. If you can harness the energy of the dragon, it's really something. So in this case of the Blue Dragon's Cave, though, I mean, if you look at it from the standpoint of renewal, so how many times have I gone down? Have I gone into that place within myself where I can be renewed, where I can experience true creativity, true renewal, right? The Blue Dragon's Cave. And the interesting thing about that one is it says, how many times have I gone for you into the Blue Dragon's Cave? Who is the you? You know, I think it's really important to see who the you is in that koan. So this one, for 10 years at sea, I've sought my enemy until I find my enemy, I cannot rest. We have to look at, well, this is a koan, so it's not about a guy who really went to sea in a boat and he's looking for to fight someone, you know. But we all do that. We've all gone through at least some point in our lives when we've been in contention with something that someone or something that we regard as being an enemy, right? And maybe it's been many years of feeling that the world and others are enemies of ours. But there's no rest in that. There's no peace in constantly battling with enemies. As long as we perceive the enemy as being something separate from us, uh, then we're always seeking to kill or capture or control. Let's say we want to control the enemy, right? Well, let's look at it in the inner sense, because Zen is always about the inner sense of things. You know, from the Western psychological standpoint, we could say that Zen is always about our inner psychology. So whenever a koan is talking about the enemy, what is it really talking about? And what does it mean to be for a decade, or you could say for a lifetime, I've been at sea. So the metaphor of the sea, right? It's this vast open place where there's no restrictions in the movement we can make. You can make any kind of a turn when you're in the ocean, you know. But if you're in this vast open space and you still are seeing your life as the search for the enemy and the vanquishing of the enemy, the vanquishing of the things within the self that are not congruent with how we feel deep down in that blue dragon's cave that we need to experience in order to have this kind of renewal, this constant feeling of renewal, we can't rest. There's an implication in this koan of the search, right? There's the searching at sea. Well, the chances of running into something at sea are minimal. It's a huge, vast area. And to find the enemy in the sea is not easy. That's, in this case, this person's been doing this a long time, perhaps, you know, really been searching for that, for whatever that person needed to resolve. What did they need to resolve? What did they need to vanquish? What did they need to overcome? You know? And eventually in Zen practice, we come to this point, hopefully we come to this point where we see that the enemy is right here. The enemy is not Kelly or Anne, Caitlin, you know. might appear like that at times. The ego is very clever at kind of tricking us. Uh, in other words, when there's some part of us that doesn't want to be revealed because it's highly protected, maybe from a very early time in our life, uh, then we're constantly triggered whenever that part is challenged. Uh, and it's kind of like the blue dragon's cave in that it's deeply, deeply hidden within the self. It's not really deeply hidden. When I use terms like deeply, there's an implication that it's not right there, but actually it's always right there. It's really interesting how we hide things from our own self. Uh, they get twisted. They're not even so much hidden, they're twisted. And that twisting, it's like untangling a knot, untangling a ball of cord that's all tangled together. It's all right there. All the different things, all the different elements we need are right there, but they're not able to function when they're all tied up, when they're all tied up with each other. They have to be separated out, given space to exist in the way that they naturally do when the ego is not in charge of that process. So the enemy is seen through when we realize that we are responsible for creating the enemy. We create the enemy on some level of our mind, usually because we need some form of protection very early on in our life, often at least. And then we wall off that part. And then it becomes, over the years, tangled up, becomes tangled up in all kinds of other things. And then there's confusion. How do I get through this? How do I change? How do I go deeper? And we start to go deeper, and all we encounter is this tangled mess. One thing tangled up with the other, you know. So we could say, in a way, that our practice is a process of getting in touch with the tangled parts and untangling them. But once you untangle them, then they can be used for something. You know, cord that's all tangled up, I mean, you can't really use it for much. When you untangle it all, then you can tie things up with the cord or whatever you want to do. So the untangling process is not easy, as you might imagine, or you probably don't have to imagine it if you've been doing this practice for a while. You've probably already encountered this many times. How many times? I don't know. How many times do you have to go into the Blue Dragon's Cave for renewal? I don't know. You know. And then, of course, we have some experience of freedom, and then what do we want? Well, we want to be free all the time. But we realize that, guess what? We feel free today. And then 3 days later, something happens. You know, we have to go back to work, or a child of ours is really bad, or, you know, we check our financial situation. We realize I can't afford this, or we have some health crisis or whatever. And all of a sudden, the triggers all are activated again, and we don't feel so free anymore. We have to go down into that cave again for renewal, and integrating all those things that are just the realities of our life, the reality of getting older, the reality of the human body, the reality of relationships, tangled up, right? So the actual Gatha here, maybe this is actually part of the Gatha, the first part, but the rest of it is blossoming peony flowers like bodhisattvas' faces, scattered palm fronds like demons' heads. Blossoming peony flowers like bodhisattvas' faces. You know, sometimes flowers inside of flowers look like faces, right? Scattered palm fronds like demons' heads. I don't quite get that metaphor, but I'll take it for what it is. So I love these two lines because it really, there's the rest, right? But then there's also the bodhisattva's faces and the demon's heads. And you can't dispense with either one. The minute that we want to chase after and seek the bodhisattva's faces to the exclusion of the demon's heads, then we miss those parts of ourself that need to be worked with. Down in the Blue Dragon Cave again, right? Keep going. How many times? I don't know. Maybe dozens or hundreds or thousands or millions, but do we have a choice? As practitioners, the object is to become more clear as we keep practicing, and to work with whatever comes up. So working with whatever comes up means whatever comes up. And if we have preference for the bodhisattva faces, and that's all we want to work with, that's all we want to deal with, then we're missing a large part of the equation that needs to be integrated. It doesn't mean that it doesn't perhaps get easier in a lot of ways as we keep doing it, as we do it for many years. But it also doesn't mean that we won't encounter deeply set demons heads that we haven't seen before, just because there's been so much entanglement, quantum entanglement. It's all mixed up in some way that we can't figure out. Time and space and matter and everything that seems real maybe doesn't even apply when we're working with this kind of stuff, right? We have to apply magic to it, magical processes. What's magical processes? Well, they're things we don't understand exactly how they work the way they do, but we see that they work. So the magical process of meditation, for instance, is a lot of people would say, well, Zen is not about magic. Well, isn't it? I mean, is it really not about magic? How can you explain how things resolve themselves when we become aware? How can we explain why we're here on this planet in the first place doing this? How can we explain any of that? Kind of magical, right? So I remember my Izumi Roshi, when he would talk about the notion of the bodhisattva, he would talk about it as constantly being willing to doubt when you need to. When doubt arises, rather than dismissing it as, well, I'm too enlightened for doubt, or no, doubt is negative and blowing past it. He talked about the need to go fully into the doubt. That's the life of the bodhisattva. When doubt arises, you work with doubt. When bodhisattvas arise or bodhisattva type activity arises, you can merge with that. Going into the Blue Dragon's Cave again and again and again. Thank you. So if this has brought up anything for you, which it might have, maybe we can have a little discussion.
Yeah, Al?
Yes. Hi, Robert.
Hey, hi. I really like this time making the connection between the being at sea looking for the enemy and then the second part, the verse, looking for the bodhisattva's faces and for the demons' heads. It occurred to me that it's not just looking for the enemy, but that it's always searching for something, trying to cling to the positive things that we want to get and avoid those demons' heads, like you said, that we really need to work with. Always searching for something and always at sea. And it's a great metaphor for the whole practice and the fact that we keep wanting to get something out of it, so we never have a chance to settle down, and really appreciate what's there in front of us. So that sense of searching and what to do with that, is a great metaphor. I appreciate you highlighting it.
Thank you. Yeah. And in the end, all we end up with is what we started out with, just us, who we are, all the untangling, all the meditating, all the everything. Zen doesn't promise us anything than what we already have at the very beginning, which is us. Of course, the difference is our perspective shifts on what that is, but it doesn't change the nature of it.
So it's interesting for me, coming back to that poem about how many times do I have to go back into the blue dragon's den? Something that occurred to me this time that didn't last time I read that is you can't live with the dragon. As much as we want to live in that space of, awakening or enlightenment, we can't live there, right? We can visit from time to time, but we have to keep going back because we can't live with the dragon. They're beyond us in a way. So that imagery kind of came up, and I like that.
That's a good point. Well, I would just say that yeah, it's true. If you look at it from that standpoint, that's true. But certainly our perspective, the awakened perspective does grow as we allow it to, get more into it. But you're right. It's if you expect to be stationary in some place, some amazing state where everything is perfect and you don't have any pain anymore, that's can be very problematic.
Just levitating 6 inches off the ground all the time.
Yeah, exactly. I'm quite a bit off the ground. I'm even more than 6 inches. See, nobody can even see on the screen. If I just say I'm level, Russ won't know. But sorry, go ahead, Russ.
So it's an interesting question, how many times, because it's like I answer this question a lot in different ways. It's like every time. The number isn't the important part. It's the part is that we go back. It's not that there's one fixed answer. It's that the emptiness of it is that it changes every time, and that so the other answer is we never actually go back. We just go there again.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's really true. And when you said that, what came up for me is the ego self does not like that, by the way. It does not like not having something secure that it can hold on to and plant its stake in, It doesn't like that kind of uncertainty because that's true not knowing, right? That's entering into it with a true openness and true not knowing. And there's many parts of us that, freeze up when we think about that kind of flow and constant change and all that. But that's the reality of life, according to the teaching, right?
And it's almost like sometimes we're asked, well, how far do I have to go? And it's like all the way.
Yeah.
You can't not go all the way. Even if you stop somewhere, you're all the way to where you went.
That's a good point.
So it's just it's our funny way of thinking about things that causes us to trip and get stuck a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as Dogen said, practice enlightenment. It's like it just rolls along, keeps rolling along, just like Old Man River. And that's just keeps rolling along.
What?
Here, Dave has the mic.
Yeah.
We actually have we're very sophisticated here
They
now,
won't hear
Jan.
you online if you don't use the mic.
What came up for me when you read Koan was the wisdom of Pogo. And it's so simple, but isn't that really what that is saying? The enemy is me. And with doing the work we were doing yesterday with the Zen dialogue, and I thought about that in my dreams and this morning and sitting, and it is really pretty tangled up. There's a lot. But I do catch myself when I project that it's out there that's upsetting me. I know it, but I don't want it.
Yeah.
Take it back. But this process of dialoguing with those parts of me, I think is always helped, but at another level, which looking forward to, because those parts are so important and they are very powerful.
Yeah.
They certainly are. So
Yeah, the untangling is powerful too. You know, once we once we begin to feel, wow, I can untangle. I can really untangle. Um, doesn't mean we don't have, we're doing it by ourselves. You know, we have lots of sources to rely on and people in the Sangha or in other places in our life that can help us also. But yeah, it's
the entanglement is a dragon, so to speak.
yeah, dragons are all tangled up. You
Yeah,
know,
they
you see
are.
them; they're all wrapped around things. You know, you gotta watch out for that. Diane.
Just 1 second.
Something I was thinking while listening was it's amazing how we're constantly at the beginning are looking out there, right? Looking for answers out there. And even when you said, well, looking for that enemy, right? The first image is the person looking out there in that vast ocean for the enemy. But then always at the end, this comes back to us. It's all the answers are here. And I loved when you said, and at the end we're left with what we started ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's I think that's something that I appreciate a lot about this practice is how brings us constantly to ourselves, right? And is so even if it's anger, what I'm feeling, it's not about whatever is out there that's making me angry, right? Is how am I kind of like processing what's happening and somehow experiencing that anger myself.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking from all of this. Thank you.
Yeah, it's hard to do. I mean, we do it even in language. We defer from ourselves. We constantly deflect from our own self-responsibility for how we're feeling. Um, that, like, I'm always talking about that one teacher I had that said, that wrote that thing that said that line, who's in charge of your inner state of being? Now, who is in charge of your inner state of being? Who's responsible for that? You know, it's so easy to say this is responsible or that's responsible or the other thing's responsible, but they can't be because they're not here. You know, and in the end, like you just said, we end up, guess what, with ourselves and the life we've created. We've created the life we're in one form or another. Um, so if we can take responsibility for that, then if we need to make changes, we can also take responsibility to make the changes. Those are the things we can do. I can't control what Diana or Wendy's going to do. And half the time I don't feel like I can control what Al does, but there are times when I can. And I, you know, beginning to get more in touch with what do I need to control that I can in order for the best outcome. You know, not blaming anyone else. Yeah, Kelly.
Just to kind of go off of what you're saying, in psychology, we teach that, you know, there's external locus of control and internal locus of control. And if you're the external locus of control is kind of what you were saying, that everyone else is causing my problems, and whereas internal locus of control is I am the one that's in control of my life. And what I always tell people is don't give your power away. If you're letting other people dictate your happiness, you're going to always be unhappy. But if you have an internal locus of control and you're the one in control of that, you have the power, you know, to claim your power. So I just wanted to go on that.
No, that's excellent. You know, it's funny because I use that word power sometimes too, because, and it's not one that you hear much in a Zen kind of traditional Zen setting, but they allude to it. They just don't use that term. But giving your power away is an excellent way to look at it. And we're not talking about ego power. We're talking about the power to affect the kind of change within us that we need to do in order for our life to be the way we feel is optimal, in accord with the things that we see we need to accomplish, you know, our life purpose. The precepts definitely help us in that regard, the Buddhist precepts, but you know, there's also a lot of ways of interpreting or acting with those too. So ultimately we have to figure out how to be true to our own path, our own self. And I think everyone's path is different. So guides can help, but ultimately we have to rely on our own deepest creative intuition. Yeah.
Go ahead. So just go ahead and speak up if you have.
Oh, okay, I just wanted to say real quickly something about the tangling, because I work with really fine yarns a lot of time, and they get into this big tangled mess quite a bit. And I've got also have a cat who gets in my yarn, and you know, if you take this tangle and you just pull on it, you only make it worse. If you're just saying, okay, I'm going to untangle, I'll just go in there and I'll rip it apart. You cannot do that. You have to go right in the middle where the densest tangling is and start really kind of looking at that structure. You know, and it can take a long time to do that. So I don't know, I was just kind of,
being a
That's making it
fisherman, I know this.
yeah. And you're like, and you can't even figure, how did I get here? How did, you know, wait a minute, just a few minutes ago, I had
that many times. This friend of mine and I, we used to go out fishing together, and we just marvel sometimes at the tangles that can happen before you even put a line in the water. They'll just be sitting there on the boat, and because of the jostling around, things will wrap around other things. And all of a sudden you look down and it takes you 15 minutes to untangle your line before you can even get it in the water. It's crazy. Yeah, it really is. It's a great metaphor. Things can also, it also a metaphor of how quickly things can tangle. Things can go south really quickly in the wrong situation, as you probably noticed. Not that anyone has ever experienced that, but it can happen.
So I was looking at the words again, trying to see them from a different angle. And one thing that struck me is that the intellect, for me at least, is drawn to the idea of, you know, I search my enemy, and until I find my enemy, I cannot rest, as if rest is the good thing, the goal. But this way, this practice of great doubt is not one of rest, because the great doubt is always here. And we're constantly needing to be in that state of, as I say, of awareness of great doubt. And if for a second we rest and think, oh, that's it, I've done it, I've made it, I'm here, you're thrown back into self-delusion again, aren't you, really?
I think in a very real sense, that's true. And I think that human beings are somehow designed to never be entirely satisfied with where they are. We just have this need to explore the next thing. You know, I mean, to just go to the next place, explore the next thing. And I think you're right. You know, but I do feel also that as we practice more, we settle more. So there's not a sense of so much of a sense of obstruction when things like that, when the things arise that need to be worked with, we can perhaps more clearly address things than before when it was so tangled up. When it's tangled up, the first thing we have to do is untangle. We can't really get anywhere until we untangle things to the point where we start to see the clarity in situations and the clarity of life. Anybody else? Take maybe one more.
Al, I just thought I'd throw in there that it's kind of nice with the points that you were both just making, that Zen is oriented that way, where they basically just say, keep going deeper. There's no endpoint, because there are some other spiritual disciplines where they really say, hey, once you got it, that's it. You don't have to do anything else.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that Zen has a never-ending program of continually looking into things more subtly.
Yeah, I think it's more in accord with the way humans are really designed. You know, the notion, the kind of what I call the guru notion of, you know, the special person that reaches this state that no one else is at. I think, and that person somehow doesn't need to work on anything anymore, has been misproven many, many times by, people that did things, and you start to go, is that really perfect behavior? Well, I don't think so. Yeah, Zen has that human element, I think, partly because the Buddha was a person, not a god or some special creature. And the Buddha is considered to be a person. And we were just talking about that yesterday. We were looking at one of the tankas on the wall when we were doing the workshop, and the Buddha is always positioned not at least in this particular tanka and most of them, the Buddha is not in the heavenly realm up where there are these bodhisattvas in the heavenly realm, but the Buddha's always down like where the humans are. And then there's, of course, the more demonic forces below, But I love the fact that the Buddha's in the middle. The Buddha's balancing the heavenly and demonic forces like everyone, that all of us have to do,
That's great. And Al, you have that great quote from Miyazumi that you've said a few times, that somewhere out there the Buddha is still practicing.
Yeah, somewhere out there the Buddha is practicing still. Yeah,
it is interesting that
universe.
It is interesting that when you talked about the fishing lines and saying it could take 15 minutes before you can actually get to fishing, and I think Zen is more like, hey, we've got this tangle, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Not that there's something else. It's not that there's something after. Relax, settle in, and let's get to doing this.
Yeah, and as I think it was it Diane that mentioned that about the yarn. Yeah, if you get frustrated and start pulling at it, it tightens it. Many years ago, I was fishing with this guy who was more experienced than me, and I got this particular tangle. It's a kind of a common thing that happens, and I started trying to pull at it. He said, no, don't pull at it like that. It just makes it tighter, and he showed me how you had to like get just what she said, get to the center of the most tangled part and kind of gently start pulling it apart. And then it gets more and more pulled apart, and then it just kind of falls away and it just becomes straight line again. And then you can use it for something. If it's all tangled, you can't use it. So it's a beautiful metaphor, definitely. I can't say that I'm always in that state when I get a tangle. I do work with that, but I cannot say honestly that I don't sometimes get frustrated. Like, I'm all out. I just want to start fishing. I don't want to sit here for 10 minutes in the sun and untangle this, but I have to do it. Anybody else? Yeah. This last person is Kate.
Just sort of speaking to what you were just talking about the tangle, it really sort of eases when we're gentle with it rather than we force. So I just kind of want to sort of gently challenge the notion that our practice needs to be this sort of state of hypervigilance. Like, I think there's kind of like an issue with the word work, like it's work we're doing. Because I sort of find, at least with I feel like the term rest is actually valuable, and perhaps it's just linguistic or it's like connotation. But to me, I only really enter that dragon's cave when I allow myself to enter a state of rest, when I totally let go. So, and I think in our culture, Western cultures, we're very conditioned to like have that hypervigilance, continually work and think we're just going to dig deeper, to keep digging. But really, to get to the dragon's cave, it's not about digging. It's about letting go and sort of into it. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So I just believe, I don't know, reframing this idea that like healing is work, and it's more like letting go, and there's softness and gentleness to it. Just a thought.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great point. Yeah, in fact, when it feels like work, it's probably not working. Because then we're trying to get it to work, What part of the self is that's trying to get it to work? It's got some idea that it's going to be a certain way. And so we're trying to force square peg into the round hole, and it's not working. I'm pounding it. It's not working. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.